Okay, settle in. Let me tell you a story. Sometimes, the path we think is ours, the one we've poured our heart and soul into building for years, suddenly crumbles beneath our feet. And in that moment of freefall, we discover not just how to land, but how to build something entirely new, something even stronger, from the wreckage. This is a story about Daniel Hayes, a man who didn't just build systems, he built futures, only to have his own seemingly erased in a 7-minute video call. Picture Daniel, 44 years old. He's sitting in his home office in Boulder, Colorado, the kind of quiet room where thoughts echo a little too loudly. It's been 3 weeks since the call. 3 weeks since Eleanor Vance, the face of the new corporate structure, delivered the news with practiced, detached efficiency. "Your role doesn't align," she'd said, the words hanging cold and sterile in the digital space between them. "Your department is being consolidated." Just like that, 12 years of his life, 12 years poured into Horizon Systems, reduced to a corporate alignment issue. Daniel had been the senior development director there. Horizon Systems, it wasn't just a job. He joined when it was barely more than an idea, just 11 people dreaming big in a converted warehouse. He was the one who built the technical backbone, the frameworks that turned Harold Sterling's vision for revolutionizing energy monitoring into reality. He remembered those early days, the 80-hour weeks fueled by cheap coffee and sheer belief, weeks that cost him his marriage. "You're married to that company," his ex-wife had thrown at him during their last fight. And honestly, she wasn't entirely wrong. Horizon was his life's work. Every major platform, every innovation that took them from a scrappy startup to a respected name in energy solutions, Daniel's fingerprints were all over them. He turned down offers from bigger companies offering more money, better benefits, because Harold, the founder, had made him feel like more than just an employee. "This is your company too, Daniel," Harold used to say, clapping him on the shoulder. There were no formal equity agreements, a mistake Daniel now understood with painful clarity. But there was always that unspoken promise. Loyalty would be rewarded. But loyalty doesn't always show up on a balance sheet. Especially not after Harold got sick 3 years ago, and his son, Marcus, took the reins. Marcus Sterling, MBA, sharp suit, eyes always on the exit strategy. He didn't share his father's passion for the work itself. He saw Horizon as a product to be polished and sold. The culture shifted almost imperceptibly at first. Quarterly metrics started overshadowing genuine innovation. Daniel saw it happening. He voiced his concerns in executive meetings, talking about the long-term vision, the soul of the company. Marcus would nod politely, that smooth MBA smile never quite reaching his eyes. "We'll circle back to that, Daniel," he'd murmur before swiftly changing the subject. They never circled back. So, when Triumph Energy Corporation, Apex Global, they called themselves now, this massive Fortune 500 behemoth, came knocking, Marcus and the leadership team practically tripped over themselves to accept the offer. The press releases gushed about synergies and shared visions. Eleanor Vance, Apex's newly appointed CEO for their division, stood before them all, promising minimal disruption. "We value the talent that built Horizon," she declared. Empty words. The layoff started just 8 days later. Daniel hadn't argued when Eleanor gave him the news over that brief Zoom call. No raised voice, no display of the churning anger and betrayal twisting inside him. He just stayed professional, asked about the transition process, noted the details, logged off. Professional to the end. But even then, a part of him wasn't entirely surprised. He'd seen the signs. 6 months earlier, he'd accidentally overheard Marcus in a conference room with 2 Apex executives. They were discussing which teams would be redundant post-acquisition. His department, the innovation engine of Horizon, was right at the top of that list. That night, the first sketch of a contingency plan began to form in his mind. Not out of certainty he'd be fired, but out of a growing unease, a realization that the company he loved was fundamentally changing, maybe irrevocably. He called it Pinnacle Dynamics, a name that felt like reaching higher, aspiring to something more than just profit margins. He kept it quiet, of course, continued to excel at his job, continued to pour his expertise into Horizon, making himself, he thought, indispensable. He even trained junior engineers meticulously, updated every piece of documentation. If they kept him, he'd stay loyal. If they didn't, well, he wouldn't be starting from scratch. The final warning signs were subtle but clear. Eleanor scheduling individual meetings with every department head except him. Being quietly dropped from strategic planning emails. A seemingly casual request from HR Matthew, was it? Wanting a quick chat about his team structure. Then, just 2 days before the axe fell, Eleanor asked for complete access to all his project archives, his development roadmaps, the very blueprints of Horizon's success. He provided everything. Promptly, thoroughly, professional, to the and so, here he was, 3 weeks later, in his quiet home office, staring at the non-compete clause in his termination paperwork. His severance package felt like blood money, but it was also seed money. He read the legalese again, a slow, sharp focus settling over him. The language was sloppy, full of loopholes, big ones. It was clear Apex Global's legal team, accustomed to swallowing smaller companies whole, hadn't bothered with due diligence. They probably assumed a laid-off director from a modest Colorado firm wouldn't have the resources or the nerve to challenge them. Their mistake. A costly one, they just didn't know it yet. His phone buzzed on the desk beside the contract. A message from Liam, Horizon's lead system architect, one of the brightest minds Daniel had ever mentored. It was the 5th message he'd received from one of his former key engineers since the acquisition chaos began. "You were right about the new management," Liam's text read. "They're gutting the innovation pipeline. Everything we built. Are you still thinking about that project we discussed?" Daniel looked at the message, then set the phone down without replying. Not yet. Timing, he knew, was everything. Patience was a weapon. He walked into his kitchen, the silence amplifying the hum of the refrigerator. He poured himself a cup of coffee, the aroma familiar, comforting. On the wall hung a large whiteboard, a relic from late-night brainstorming sessions. It was covered in notes. Names of Horizon's top clients, their specific operational pain points, the custom solutions his team had painstakingly developed for them. Solutions that were now, according to Apex's grand plan, destined for the scrap heap, to be replaced by people who didn't understand the intricacies, the years of refinement. Below the client list, almost hidden in the corner, were 5 names. Liam, Maria, Ben, Chloe, David, the core engineering talent, the innovators, people he'd personally recruited, mentored, people who trusted him, people who were now, one by one, reaching out, asking, "What's next, Daniel?" He hadn't given them a direct answer yet. His plan, the blueprint for Pinnacle Dynamics, needed a little more time, a little more refinement. But it was close, very close, the moment that truly galvanized him, that turned simmering resentment into cold, hard resolve, came about 6 weeks after the acquisition. Apex held a company-wide presentation. 47 people, 47 loyal Horizon employees, had already been let go by then. Daniel attended, blending into the crowd of remaining staff, their faces a mixture of anxiety and forced optimism. Eleanor Vance stood on the stage, the same stage where Horizon used to unveil its technical breakthroughs, radiating corporate confidence. And then she dropped the bomb. Horizon Systems platforms will be phased out over the next 18 months, she announced smoothly, as we transition all clients to Apex Global's proven enterprise architecture. Proven? Daniel almost scoffed out loud. The Apex architecture she was referring to was outdated by at least 3 years. His team at Horizon had specifically developed their more agile, more customizable solutions because Apex's rigid, monolithic system couldn't handle the complex, real-time demands of modern energy clients. Now they were planning to dismantle years of cutting-edge work that addressed specific client needs, just to force everyone onto their inferior, one-size-fits-all platform. It wasn't about synergy. It was about control and cost-cutting, regardless of the impact on the client's Horizon had served so faithfully. He looked around the auditorium. He saw the exchanged glances between the remaining engineers, the flicker of disbelief and dismay in their eyes. They knew exactly what this meant. Years of their dedicated work, their elegant solutions erased. Client needs disregarded. The very innovations that made Horizon valuable enough for Apex to acquire were being systematically destroyed by the acquirer. It was illogical. It was disrespectful. It was corporate arrogance at its worst. Daniel didn't speak during the Q&A session. He didn't challenge Eleanor's smooth assertions about economies of scale and streamlined operations. He just watched, observed who was nodding along, buying the corporate spin, and who was staring down at their notebooks, avoiding eye contact, their silence speaking volumes. After the meeting, he walked slowly to his car in the parking garage. He sat there for a long time, nearly an hour, the engine off, the concrete pillars standing like silent witnesses. The initial sting of being fired had faded, replaced by something deeper, colder. This wasn't just about him anymore. This wasn't just about losing a job he loved. This was about watching something valuable, something he had poured his life into building, being deliberately broken apart by people who didn't understand its worth or worse, didn't care. Felt like a violation. That evening, back in his home office, the quiet no longer felt empty, but charged with purpose. He opened his laptop. The business plan for Pinnacle Dynamics, once a contingency, a what-if, now felt like an inevitability, a necessity. He finalized the details, the market analysis, the technical strategy, the lean operational model. Then he created a secure, encrypted messaging group. He added the 5 names from his whiteboard: Liam, Maria, Ben, Chloe, David. His message was simple, direct. If you're serious about building something better, I have a proposal. Discretion is essential. The responses came back almost instantly. 5 variations of "I'm in. Tell me more. When do we start?" The following weeks were a blur of clandestine activity. Evening meetings at Daniel's house, fueled by pizza and a shared sense of mission. They gathered around his kitchen table, the whiteboard now repurposed, covered in new diagrams, new strategies. They dissected Apex's approach, identifying every flaw, every missed opportunity, every assumption based on outdated thinking. They mapped out the clients most likely to be burned by the forced migration, clients whose specific needs Apex was blatantly ignoring. Crucially, they figured out how to evolve the principles behind the best Horizon systems, how to build something fundamentally new and better, without infringing on any intellectual property Apex now technically owned. It was about innovation, not imitation. Daniel took his severance package, the payout meant to silence him, and funneled it directly into the foundations of Pinnacle. He secured a small, unassuming office space in a less flashy part of Boulder. He filed the incorporation papers, chose the name carefully, Pinnacle Dynamics, evoking elevation, reaching the summit, rising above the corporate wreckage left behind by Apex. The day after his final paycheck from Apex cleared his bank account, a message popped up on his phone. It was from Marcus Sterling, Harold's son, the man who'd greased the wheels for the acquisition. "Heard you might be starting something, Daniel," the message read. "We should talk before you do anything hasty." Daniel stared at the message for a beat, a wry smile touching his lips. Hasty? He'd been planning this for months. Talk? What was there to talk about? The time for conversations had passed weeks ago, during that 7-minute Zoom call where Eleanor Vance decided 12 years of his dedication didn't align with their corporate structure. He deleted Marcus's message without replying. Instead, he sent a different message, this one to the secure group chat with his team of 5. Office space secured. Legal docs ready. Timeline accelerated. Are you ready to resign tomorrow? 5 confirmations flashed back within minutes. Yes. Absolutely. Let's do this. Ready. Couldn't be more ready. Daniel closed his laptop. His gaze fell on a framed photo on his desk, a snapshot from 12 years ago. The original Horizon Systems team, young, hopeful, standing proudly beside their first working prototype. Harold Sterling's arm was slung around Daniel's shoulder, both of them grinning, exhausted but exhilarated. A silent promise formed in Daniel's mind. "This one's for you, Harold," he murmured quietly to the photo. "We'll build it right this time, the way it was meant to be." The first few months of Pinnacle Dynamics were intense. Bootstrapped, lean, running on fumes and sheer determination. But they had something Apex didn't: agility, deep expertise, and a shared understanding of what their potential clients really needed. 3 months in, they landed their first major client, Novatech Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing facility, precisely the kind of client Horizon had excelled at serving. Their operations director, Anthony, had worked closely with Daniel for years, customizing Horizon's energy management systems to fit Novatech's unique production cycles. Daniel and Liam went in for the pitch meeting. "Apex's integration team, they just don't get it," Anthony confided, frustration etched on his face. "They keep trying to shove us into their standard package. It's like talking to a wall. They don't understand our requirements, the nuances we spent years refining with you guys." Daniel and Liam didn't just talk. They demonstrated. They showed Anthony the Pinnacle platform, built on the core principles of Horizon's success, but leaner, faster, more adaptable, and designed specifically to address the gaps Apex was creating. Anthony saw the difference immediately. He saw the understanding, the tailored approach, the familiar commitment to solving his problems, not just fitting him into a box. He signed the contract that same day. It felt like the first ray of sunshine after a long storm. But the storm wasn't over. Oh no. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived at their small office. Thick, expensive paper, bearing the imposing logo of Apex Global's legal department. It cited breach of the non-compete agreement and alleged theft of proprietary information. It demanded immediate cessation of all Pinnacle operations. It threatened litigation with the full force of a Fortune 500 company. Daniel felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach, but it was overlaid with a sense of inevitability. He had anticipated this. He'd already consulted with Eleanor Winslow, a sharp, experienced attorney specializing in tech and employment law. She reviewed Apex's threatening letter and confirmed Daniel's own assessment. "Their non-compete is poorly constructed, Daniel," Eleanor Winslow said, her voice calm and reassuring over the phone. "It references energy management solutions far too broadly to be realistically enforceable, especially since they're phasing out the specific systems you built. And the proprietary theft claim? They have zero evidence because you didn't steal anything. You built something new, but knowing you're legally in the right and having the resources to fight a corporate giant like Apex are two very different things. A protracted legal battle could bleed Pinnacle dry before they even got off the ground. Apex knew that. This wasn't just about legal merit. It was about intimidation, financial warfare. Daniel decided on a direct approach. He requested a meeting with Eleanor Vance. Surprisingly, she agreed quickly, probably assuming he was coming, cap in hand, ready to surrender. The meeting took place at Apex Global's gleaming downtown headquarters, a monument to corporate power, all glass and steel and hushed, expensive carpets. The old Horizon Systems logo was still there, but relegated to a small, almost apologetic sign in a far corner of the vast reception area. A ghost of what was. Eleanor didn't waste time with pleasantries. As soon as they sat down in a sterile conference room overlooking the city, she fixed him with a cool, appraising stare. "You understand this can't continue, Daniel?" she began, her voice smooth as polished stone. "Your company directly competes using technology you helped develop while employed by Horizon, now an Apex subsidiary." Daniel met her gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. "The technology one developed while employed there is being actively phased out, according to your own public integration roadmap, Eleanor. he replied calmly. My non-compete specifically prohibits using Horizon's proprietary systems, which Pinnacle is not doing. Our architecture was built from the ground up. Addressing needs your current platform can't. He saw a flicker of annoyance cross her face, quickly masked. Regardless, she pressed on, you've violated the spirit of the agreement, and you've poached our key employees. Former employees, Daniel corrected gently, who left voluntarily after the acquisition fundamentally changed their roles and invalidated the work they were passionate about. She leaned forward slightly, shifting tactics, the iron fist in the velvet glove. Daniel, let's be practical here. Apex Global has virtually unlimited resources for litigation. You have what? 3 months of operating capital, maybe? Why put yourself, your team, through this inevitable struggle? It's damaging for everyone. She paused, letting the weight of the implied threat hang in the air. Then came the hook. We could bring you back as a consultant during the transition. A 2-year contract. Excellent compensation. Help us smooth things over. And there it was. The trap. Clear as day. They didn't want him back. They didn't value his expertise any more than they had 3 weeks ago. They wanted to neutralize him, bind him with a new contract, shelve Pinnacle Dynamics permanently, and prevent him from becoming a viable competitor, especially one who knew their weaknesses intimately. It was a strategic move disguised as an olive branch. Daniel allowed himself a small, internal sigh. The predictability of it all. He stood up slowly. I appreciate the offer, Eleanor, he said, his voice even. But I believe in what we're building at Pinnacle. I'll take my chances. He walked out of that gleaming tower, leaving Eleanor Vance sitting alone in the cold conference room, her expression hardening. He knew the fight wasn't over. In fact, it was probably just beginning. Apex didn't wait long to escalate. That very afternoon, their legal team contacted Novatech Industries. They also reached out to 2 other companies that had expressed strong interest in Pinnacle after hearing about the Novatech deal. The message was blunt. Veiled threats about potential legal entanglements if they worked with Pinnacle. Warnings about the questionable legality of Pinnacle's technology. Hints of future audits on existing Apex systems if loyalty wavered. Anthony from Novatech called Daniel immediately, his voice tight with frustration and anxiety. They're threatening to audit our existing systems, Daniel, he said, the strain evident. They're talking about voiding our maintenance agreements if we proceed with Pinnacle. We can't risk that kind of disruption right now, not with production schedules this tight. I'm so sorry. Within 24 hours, all 3 prospects, including Novatech, their first crucial win, had put their potential contracts with Pinnacle on indefinite hold. Just like that, Pinnacle's financial runway, which had seemed promising just days before, shrank alarmingly. They went from having months of breathing room to maybe just weeks. The weight of responsibility pressed down on Daniel not just for himself, but for Liam, Maria, Ben, Chloe, and David, who had all taken a huge leap of faith, resigning from stable jobs to join him. That evening, the small team gathered in their sparse office. The initial excitement of the Novatech deal had evaporated, replaced by a heavy tension. 5 pairs of eyes looked towards Daniel, waiting for direction, for reassurance. The air felt thick with unspoken fear. Okay, Daniel began, acknowledging the elephant in the room. They're playing hardball, exactly as we expected they might. He let that sink in for a moment. But, he continued, his voice steady, deliberate, in their haste to crush us, I believe they've made a significant strategic error. He pulled up an email he'd received that morning. An unexpected message from a name he hadn't seen in years. Harold Sterling, the original founder of Horizon Systems. Harold had been watching the acquisition unfold from his retirement, silently observing the dismantling of his life's work. Daniel, the email read, I've been following what's happening. Heard about the pressure tactics. Apex didn't just acquire Horizon's technology. They acquired its problems, too. And maybe its obligations. Call me. I think we might be able to help each other. Daniel looked up from his laptop, meeting the worried eyes of his team. Apex is so focused on us, on silencing a potential competitor, he explained, that they're neglecting the massive technical challenge of their own integration plan. They're forcing clients onto a system that isn't ready, and in some cases, isn't right. We know the weaknesses in the original Horizon architecture better than anyone, the parts that needed careful handling, the custom builds. He saw a flicker of understanding dawn on Liam's face. And Harold says, Daniel continued, leaning forward, that they're already experiencing system failures with some key clients who are further along in the forced migration process. Liam nodded slowly, the pieces clicking into place. And those clients, they're going to need solutions, fast. Solutions Apex can't deliver quickly because they're trying to fit everyone into their standard, outdated box. Exactly, Daniel confirmed, a spark of defiant energy returning to the room. Apex is trying to bury us under legal threats and FUD fear, uncertainty, and doubt, while their own technical foundation is starting to crumble under the weight of their arrogance. We don't need to fight them head-on in court right now. We don't have the resources for that. We just need to be ready. Ready for when their biggest clients start looking for a lifeboat. The meeting with Harold Sterling changed the entire game. Daniel drove out to Harold's lake house, a quiet retreat nestled in the foothills outside Boulder, far from the prying eyes of the corporate world. Harold, now in his early 70s, moved a bit slower than Daniel remembered from their intense workdays years ago, but his mind was as sharp and incisive as ever. They didn't just buy Horizon for the technology, Daniel, Harold explained, spreading faded blueprints and documents across his large oak dining table. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the ghosts of old plans. They bought it for the client contracts. Specifically, he tapped a thick binder, the Keystone Utilities account. Keystone Utilities. Daniel knew them well. They were Horizon's largest, most complex client, a major regional utility provider serving 3 states. Their contract alone represented nearly 30% of Horizon's annual revenue before the acquisition. It was the crown jewel. What Apex and frankly Marcus didn't fully grasp, Harold continued, his voice low and serious, is that Keystone's infrastructure requirements are incredibly unique. Their grid management system, it wasn't just customized, it was practically bespoke. We built it together piece by painstaking piece. He looked directly at Daniel. You led that project, didn't you? Nearly burned yourself out on it. Daniel nodded, the memories flooding back. 4 years of intense development, countless late nights, pushing his team to the absolute limit to get it right, to meet Keystone's incredibly demanding specifications for reliability and real-time data processing. Harold slid a document across the table. It looked like an internal Apex memo, marked confidential. This came from a board member, Harold said quietly. Someone who still feels a measure of loyalty to what Horizon stood for, not what Apex is turning it into. Look at this. Daniel read the memo. His eyes widened. Apex was promising Keystone Utilities a seamless integration onto the standard Apex platform, while internally planning to force them onto that architecture, dismissing Keystone's specific, hard-won requirements as unnecessary legacy customizations that would be standardized for efficiency. The timeline outlined was insane. A 6-month migration schedule for a deeply embedded system that had taken Daniel's team 4 years to build and stabilize. It was technically impossible without cutting massive corners. Keystone's CEO, Sarah Chun, she doesn't know the full extent of this yet, Harold said, his voice barely a whisper. They're feeding her corporate assurances. But when Apex actually begins the implementation, when the limitations become brutally clear, Daniel finished the thought, a cold realization washing over him. Keystone will face service disruptions, data reporting failures, possibly even regulatory fines if they can't maintain the required reporting standards for grid stability. Exactly, Harold confirmed, tapping another document, the original Keystone contract. And here's the kicker. The part Apex's due diligence team clearly missed or underestimated. The contract I negotiated with Keystone years ago includes stringent performance guarantees. We're talking 99.9% uptime requirements, with significant financial penalties for any systemic failures that drop below that threshold. Wow, there it was, the Achilles heel. Apex hadn't just acquired a company and its assets. They'd inherited massive obligations they were technically incapable of fulfilling because they were dismantling the very expertise needed to meet them. No wonder they were so desperate to shut down Pinnacle Dynamics. They were terrified Daniel and his team might approach Keystone, might expose the integration disaster waiting to happen before it blew up in Apex's face. They needed Pinnacle gone, silenced, buried under legal threats so they could manage the inevitable Keystone fallout on their own terms, likely blaming the old Horizon systems. But Daniel sensed something else in Harold's demeanor, a personal edge beneath the strategic analysis. "Why are you helping us, Harold?" Daniel asked directly. "Apex paid you well for the acquisition, didn't they?" Harold's gaze hardened, the genial grandfatherly air vanishing, replaced by a steely glint. "They paid," he admitted, his voice tight with controlled anger. "But then they used complex clauses buried deep in the agreement clauses Marcus didn't fully understand when he signed off, to devalue the final earn-out payments based on unexpected integration costs and inherited system deficiencies. The headline figure the press reported? We received maybe 60% of that after all their deductions. And my son Marcus, his remaining founder stake was wiped out entirely. They played him. Oh my gosh. The betrayal ran even deeper than Daniel had realized. Apex hadn't just discarded the loyal employees and technology. They'd financially manipulated the deal itself, cheating the founder's family out of a significant portion of the agreed price using obscure financial engineering that Marcus, blinded by the allure of a quick, prestigious exit, hadn't detected. "Does Marcus know you're talking to me?" Daniel asked. Harold shook his head slowly, a profound weariness settling over him. "Marcus took a position with Apex's corporate development team. Thinks he's being groomed for executive leadership. He's still drinking the Kool-Aid." The disappointment in his voice was palpable. "He'll learn eventually. The hard way, I suspect." As Daniel drove back towards Boulder, the pieces clicked into place, forming a grim, larger picture. This wasn't just about his termination or Apex making bad business decisions. This felt like systematic corporate predation. A playbook. Identify smaller, innovative companies with valuable client relationships, acquire them under the guise of partnership and growth, promise the world, then systematically strip mine the assets they wanted, like the Keystone contract, dismantle the rest, discard the people who built it, and manipulate the financials to minimize the payout. The engineers they fired, calculated losses, the promises they broke, standard negotiating tactics, the technologies they dismantled, inconvenient complications, the founders they cheated, acceptable collateral damage in the pursuit of shareholder value. He pulled into his driveway, the engine idling for several minutes as he sat in silence, the weight of this understanding settling heavily upon him. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about something more fundamental. It was about integrity. It was about proving that there was a different way to build, a different way to succeed. He shut off the engine, took a deep breath, and picked up his phone. He dialed Liam. "Liam? It's Daniel. Contact the team. Emergency meeting at the office, tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. sharp." There was a pause. "We need to accelerate development of our Keystone-compatible platform now, and I need you to pull together every single piece of documentation, every design spec, every note we have on their specific grid architecture from the Horizon days. Everything." "Keystone?" Liam asked, his voice a mixture of awe and apprehension. Are we really going after Keystone?" "Not yet," Daniel replied, his voice calm but firm. "We're not making the first move, but we are going to be ready. We're going to build the lifeboat, because the storm is coming for them, Liam. and I have a feeling it's going to hit sooner and harder than Apex expects. They had Daniel estimated maybe 8 weeks. 8 weeks before the cracks in Apex's Keystone integration plan would likely become undeniable fissures. 8 weeks to build a fully functional, deployable alternative platform, one that could seamlessly interface with Keystone's complex existing infrastructure while offering the stability and performance Apex was about to fail to deliver. The Pinnacle Dynamics office transformed into a pressure cooker. The team worked around the clock, fueled by coffee, takeout, and a shared sense of urgent purpose. They weren't just coding. They were architects, designing a sophisticated system under immense pressure, drawing on their deep, collective knowledge of Keystone's unique needs knowledge Apex had foolishly discarded. Daniel focused on strategy and ensuring they stayed well clear of any actual Horizon/Apex intellectual property, focusing instead on innovative solutions to the problems they knew Keystone faced. He maintained a strict, careful distance from any official Keystone contacts. He knew Apex would be watching, monitoring emails, calls, any hint of communication. The slightest misstep could give Apex the ammunition they needed for their legal threats. Instead, Daniel focused inwards, building the platform, preparing technical documentation, and meticulously gathering evidence. They tracked every public announcement, every industry whisper, every reported glitch related to Apex's ongoing integration efforts with other former Horizon clients. They compiled a comprehensive, damning analysis of where Apex's one-size-fits-all approach was fundamentally flawed and destined to fail with a client as complex as Keystone. Meanwhile, Harold Sterling, operating from the quiet sanctuary of his retirement, began subtly activating his extensive network within the energy sector. He didn't mention Pinnacle directly. He didn't reveal their strategy. Instead, he started asking pointed questions at industry conferences, during board meetings he still attended, in casual conversations with senior executives. Questions about the risks of forced system migrations, the challenges of integrating bespoke utility systems, the importance of maintaining customized performance levels. He was planting seeds of doubt, raising awareness of the very issues Apex was trying to sweep under the rug. The conversation started bubbling up, precisely where they needed it to, in the professional circles where Keystone Utilities' technical leadership, including CEO Sarah Chun, participated and listened. The first major crack appeared about 5 weeks into Pinnacle's intensive preparation. Just as Harold's sources had predicted, Apex initiated the first phase of the Keystone system migration, and almost immediately, they hit turbulence. 3 major substations experienced critical monitoring failures, creating alarming gaps in the real-time data needed for grid management and, crucially, for regulatory compliance reporting. Publicly, Keystone's Chief Technology Officer, Vanessa Powell-Waite, Daniel recalled Harold mentioning the CEO was Sarah Chun. Let's keep that consistent. So, Keystone's CEO, Sarah Chun, issued carefully worded statements describing the incidents as anticipated transition challenges that were being actively addressed by Apex. Standard corporate damage control. But privately, Harold's contacts reported that Sarah Chun was furious. The failures were precisely in areas her team had warned Apex about, warnings that Apex had dismissed as unnecessary resistance to change. 2 weeks later, the situation went critical. Apex pushed forward with the second phase of the migration, and it triggered a catastrophic 4-hour reporting blackout across an entire service region. This wasn't just a glitch. It was a major operational failure with potentially serious regulatory consequences. Keystone Utilities immediately issued a formal notice of deficiency to Apex Global, officially triggering the performance guarantee clauses in their contract, the ones with the crippling financial penalties Harold had warned Daniel about. Apex's response was incredibly revealing and, for Daniel, strategically perfect. Instead of owning the failure of their integration approach, they publicly, and in their official response to Keystone, assigned blame to inherited architectural limitations and undocumented complexities within the original Horizon Systems platform. They were trying to build a narrative to void the performance guarantees by claiming the system they acquired was fundamentally defective from the start. It was a desperate, blame-shifting tactic, and it was the exact opening Daniel had been waiting for. Working with his team, Daniel finalized the detailed technical analysis they had been preparing. It wasn't just opinion. It was data-driven, drawing on years of performance metrics from the original Horizon system at Keystone, cross-referenced with the known limitations of Apex's architecture. It clearly, unequivocally demonstrated how the recent failures stemmed not from Horizon's original design, but directly from Apex's incompatible integration methods and their dismissal of critical customization requirements. It proved Apex was not only failing but trying to cover its tracks by slandering the very system they had acquired. Harold Sterling, using his established credibility and access, delivered this confidential analysis personally, directly into the hands of Sarah Chun at Keystone Utilities. 3 days passed. 3 days of nerve-wracking silence. Then, Daniel's phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. Short, cryptic. Coffee tomorrow? 2 p.m. Westside Roasters. It was signed simply, SC, Sarah Chun. Daniel arrived at the coffee shop exactly at 2. Westside Roasters was busy. Anonymous. Sarah Chun was already seated in a quiet booth tucked away in the corner, nursing a cup of tea. She looked composed, professional, but Daniel could see the underlying strain around her eyes. She wasted no time on small talk. Your analysis, she began, her voice low and measured, barely audible above the cafe chatter. It matches our internal findings precisely. Apex is attempting to force us onto their standard system, likely to avoid the long-term costs of maintaining our necessary customizations. The integration is failing, and the regulatory risks are becoming unacceptable. You have options, Sarah, Daniel replied carefully, keeping his tone neutral. She gave a slight, humorless smile. Do I? Our contract with Apex is ironclad. Breaking it would trigger termination penalties that would exceed our entire annual technology budget. We'd be jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire, financially. Unless, Daniel suggested gently, Apex is already in material breach of that contract through significant, documented performance failures. Failures that create unacceptable operational and regulatory risk, which I suspect your legal team is exploring very, very thoroughly right now. Sarah Chen's faint nod confirmed his suspicion. Even if we establish breach, she countered, we'd still need an immediate, viable alternative. Grid monitoring and regulatory reporting can't just stop while we run a 9-month vendor selection process. We need a seamless transition yesterday. This was the moment. Daniel slid a slim, unmarked flash drive across the table. This contains a detailed technical overview of the Pinnacle Dynamics platform, he said quietly. It was built by the core team that designed your original Horizon system. It's designed specifically to interface with your existing infrastructure and address the exact performance and reporting issues you're experiencing right now. We can deploy key functionalities within 3 weeks, Sarah, with 0 regulatory interruption during the transition. She picked up the drive, her expression unreadable, and slipped it into her briefcase without looking at it. Apex claims you violated non-compete agreements. They've warned us about potential legal challenges associated with your technology. They've made those claims, yes, Daniel acknowledged calmly, and they've used them to intimidate potential clients. But their legal position has significant weaknesses, particularly given their decision to decommission the very systems the non-compete vaguely references. He slid a second flash drive across the table. This one contains our attorney's detailed analysis of the non-compete's flaws and Apex's lack of standing for an intellectual property claim against Pinnacle. Your legal team will find it illuminating. Sarah Chun nodded once, gathering her things. I'll be in touch, she said simply, and then she was gone, melting back into the lunchtime crowd. Daniel sat there for a moment, the adrenaline slowly receding. He had laid his cards on the table. Now it was up to Keystone. 2 days later, the dam broke. Apex Global issued a stunning public announcement. They were implementing an emergency stabilization plan for Keystone Utility Systems effectively pausing the troubled integration project. It was a thinly veiled admission that their approach had failed spectacularly. Apex's stock price dropped 8% by the close of market that day. That evening, Daniel received an official expedited request for proposal (RFP) from Keystone Utilities. It bypassed their standard, lengthy procurement process, citing emergency operational necessity and regulatory compliance risks. Daniel gathered his small, exhausted, but exhilarated team in their office. He held up the RFP document. "This is it," he announced, his voice ringing with quiet intensity. "Keystone needs a solution immediately, and he looked around at Liam, Maria, Ben, Chloe, David. "We have built exactly what they require. Everything we've worked for, everything we've risked, comes down to this proposal." Liam voiced the question hanging in the air. "Should we be concerned about Apex's response when they find out we're bidding? They won't just stand by." Daniel shook his head, a sense of calm certainty settling over him. "They created their own crisis through arrogance and incompetence," he said firmly. "They tried to bury us. Now they'll have to watch us solve the problem they couldn't handle. Let's get this proposal perfect." The Keystone Utilities board meeting to approve the emergency contract was scheduled for 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning. Daniel and his team waited in their office, the silence punctuated only by the ticking clock and the occasional nervous sip of coffee. 10:30 came and went. 10:40. The tension was unbearable. Then, at exactly 10:45 a.m., Daniel's phone rang. It was Sarah Chin. "Unanimous approval," she said, her voice crisp, professional, but with an unmistakable undercurrent of relief. "No preamble, no small talk. Expedited contract execution is underway. We need implementation to begin this Monday." Daniel felt a wave of profound relief wash over him, so strong it almost buckled his knees. He relayed the news to the team, and the small office erupted in cheers, hugs, and maybe a few tears of sheer exhaustion and joy. Within the hour, their attorney, Eleanor Winslow, confirmed the contract details. It was clean, ironclad, no hidden traps. Keystone had agreed to Pinnacle's full implementation fee, plus a robust 3-year maintenance and support agreement. The numbers were substantial, more than enough to secure Pinnacle Dynamics' future for years to come. But even more importantly, buried in the legalese was a specific clause providing Pinnacle with full indemnification against any potential legal claims from Apex Global related to the contract or the technology. Keystone's formidable legal team had clearly reviewed Eleanor Winslow's analysis, conducted their own due diligence, and reached the same conclusion. Apex's non-compete and IP theft claims were built on sand. They wouldn't hold up under serious legal scrutiny, especially not when weighed against the urgent public interest of maintaining stable utility services. Keystone was willing to back Pinnacle, legally and financially. The news hit the energy industry trade publications by mid-afternoon. Apex Global stock tumbled again, dropping another 12% as investors realized the implications. Not only had their major integration project failed, but they had also lost their single largest legacy client to a tiny startup founded by the very people they had fired. Apex's reaction was swift and furious. Their legal team immediately filed for an emergency injunction in federal court, seeking to block the Pinnacle Keystone contract before implementation could begin. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. Monday morning, the exact same day Daniel and his team were supposed to walk into Keystone Utilities and start saving their systems. Monday morning arrived, gray and tense. Daniel, Liam, and Eleanor Winslow walked into the imposing federal courthouse. Across the aisle, Apex had assembled a formidable team, 4 high-powered attorneys, led by their grim-faced chief counsel. And sitting directly behind them, her expression a mask of tightly controlled fury, was Eleanor Vance. The judge, a sharp, no-nonsense woman known for her efficiency, reviewed the emergency filings from both sides. She listened patiently to Apex's arguments about non-competes, proprietary information, and irreparable harm. Then she looked directly at Apex's lead attorney. "Counsel, the judge said, her voice cutting through the courtroom tension. Your client's non-compete agreements appear, on their face, to prohibit the use of specific proprietary Horizon Systems platforms. The evidence presented suggests Pinnacle Dynamics developed an independent architecture to address performance issues your client was demonstrably unable to resolve. She paused, her gaze unwavering. Furthermore, Keystone Utilities' filing clearly demonstrates an urgent public interest in maintaining utility service reliability for hundreds of thousands of customers. An interest that currently appears best served by allowing this contract to proceed without delay. She looked down at the papers again, then back at Apex's counsel. The motion for a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction is denied. Just like that, no further deliberation needed. A collective, quiet exhale seemed to ripple through Daniel's side of the courtroom. As they filed out, Eleanor Vance intercepted Daniel in the hallway, her eyes blazing. This isn't over, Daniel, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. Apex Global doesn't lose. Daniel met her gaze, holding it steadily. The anger and bitterness he might have felt months ago were gone, replaced by a quiet, centered resolve. This was never about winning or losing for me, Eleanor, he replied calmly. It was about building something that actually works. Something that serves the clients properly. He didn't wait for her response. He simply turned and walked past her, joining Liam and Eleanor Winslow, who were waiting with small, relieved smiles. Together, they walked out of the courthouse and into the bright morning sun, ready to begin the work that would not only secure Keystone Utilities' critical systems but also cement Pinnacle Dynamics' future. A future built not on acquisition and dismantling, but on innovation, integrity, and genuine problem-solving. The victory wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet, and it felt complete. 18 months flew by. 18 months after that tense courtroom showdown and the subsequent flawless implementation at Keystone Utilities, Pinnacle Dynamics was almost unrecognizable from the bootstrap startup huddled in a small, rented office. They now occupied an entire floor of a modern building in downtown Boulder, the windows offering panoramic views of the same Rocky Mountains that had silently witnessed Daniel's professional collapse and quiet resurrection. The team had grown from the initial 6 to 27 employees. Engineers, support staff, project managers, many of them carefully recruited former Horizon colleagues who had watched Pinnacle's rise with growing admiration. The Keystone implementation had been completed ahead of schedule, under budget, and with zero service interruptions. It was a masterclass in technical execution and project management. Word spread like wildfire through the specialized world of energy sector technology. Keystone Utilities, under Sarah Chen's leadership, became an outspoken advocate for Pinnacle's platform and approach. Within a year, for more major clients, disillusioned with Apex's rigid systems and lack of responsive support, migrated their operations from Apex Global to Pinnacle Dynamics. Each transition was handled with the same meticulous care and technical precision, further solidifying Pinnacle's reputation. Apex Global, facing mounting client dissatisfaction and the public relations fallout from the Keystone debacle, eventually abandoned its legal pursuit of Pinnacle. Their threats had proven toothless once Keystone called their bluff. They quietly settled the remaining financial disputes with Harold Sterling under confidential terms, likely deciding it was better to cut their losses than risk further damaging revelations. Their energy division underwent a major restructuring. Eleanor Vance was quietly reassigned to oversee a struggling subsidiary in a completely different industry, far from the energy sector spotlight. And Marcus Sterling, Harold's son, departed Apex Global to, as the press release vaguely stated, pursue opportunities in the startup incubator space, perhaps finally learning the hard lessons his father had foreseen. Harold Sterling became a frequent, welcome visitor at the Pinnacle offices. He never took an official role, preferring his retirement, but he'd wander through the engineering bays, chat with the team, his eyes shining with a quiet, unmistakable pride as he watched the rebirth of his original vision, this time built on an even stronger foundation of integrity and shared purpose. His quiet guidance and industry wisdom remained invaluable to Daniel. Then, on the second anniversary of his termination from Horizon, the day that had once felt like the end of everything, Daniel received an unexpected email. It wasn't from Harold or Sarah Chun or anyone currently in his orbit. It was from his very first boss at Horizon Systems, the person who had hired him 12 years prior, someone he hadn't spoken to since before the acquisition chaos began. Daniel, the email read simply, "I've been watching Pinnacle's success from afar. You built something better, something truer to the original spirit than we ever could have under Apex. Several of us saw the writing on the wall back then, but felt powerless to prevent the acquisition. Just wanted to say, congratulations. Some victories take time, but they are no less sweet. Well deserved." Daniel closed his laptop, a profound sense of closure washing over him. He walked out of his office and into the main conference room, where the team was gathered, celebrating the successful completion of a complex new platform module. Laughter filled the room, the easy camaraderie born of shared challenges and mutual respect. These weren't just colleagues anymore. They were partners, fellow travelers who had taken the same leap of faith he had, knowing that competence, dedication, and doing the right thing could ultimately outperform cutthroat corporate politics and short-sighted greed. Later that evening, Daniel stood alone on the deck of his home, the same home where he'd sat 3 years earlier, reeling from the shock of dismissal. The setting sun was painting the familiar peaks of the Rockies in hues of orange, pink, and deep purple. The bitter taste of betrayal, that cold knot of anger that had resided in his gut for so long, had finally, completely faded. In its place was something surprising, something he wouldn't have expected. A quiet sense of gratitude. Gratitude? It seemed paradoxical, but he realized, standing there in the cool evening air, that without Apex Global's arrogance, without Eleanor Vance's dismissive judgment, without Marcus Sterling's misplaced ambition, Pinnacle Dynamics might never have been born. The pain of being pushed out, the injustice of it all, had inadvertently forged a new path. He hadn't just reclaimed his career. He had built something infinitely more meaningful, something deeply aligned with his own values, something Horizon, under Apex's suffocating control, could never have become. Sometimes, he reflected, getting pushed out of the wrong place, however painful the fall, is exactly what you need to find your footing in the right one. The place you were meant to build all along. And that's Daniel's story. A journey through unexpected loss, quiet resilience, and the powerful realization that sometimes the greatest act of revenge isn't about tearing something down, but about building something better, something lasting, on your own terms. It reminds us that integrity and expertise can be silent weapons, and true victory often lies not in loud confrontation, but in quiet competence and unwavering purpose. If this story resonated with you, if it touched on experiences or feelings you recognize in your own journey, please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. We learn so much from hearing each other's perspectives. And if you'd like to continue walking with us through more stories like Daniel's, stories of strength, redemption, and the quiet power of the human spirit, please consider subscribing to the channel. You're always welcome here in this space. Finally, if you feel moved to support our mission of sharing these important narratives, you can contribute through the Super Thanks feature. Giving, in any form, is often a part of our own healing and helps us continue bringing these journeys to light. Thank you for listening, truly. We'll see you in the next story.